Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished professional, a well-known coach from Bangalore, India, Aparna Mathur. Aparna, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. Good morning.
Aparna is a couples counseling therapy and a leadership coach. She's a facilitator, advocate for gender equality, and a development sector activist. So, Aparna, before we get into couples counseling therapy, a few questions for you. You've had an incredibly diverse career from sales in a male dominated industry to leadership coaching and couples therapy. Tell me about your journey and what was the inspiration for these amazing shifts?
Okay, yes, you're absolutely right, Ashutosh. It has been a very diverse career that I've had, but much of it has not been out of design, but quite,
Mhm.
it has come about because I've responded to the call in my heart
Yeah,
and I've done things that I've truly enjoyed, the kind of things that would make me get to office on a Monday morning.
correct.
So I joined the Times of India. I wanted to be in sales. I was very clear because at that point in time, financial independence was my goal. And I wanted to, earn. I saw sales as a good way to get there. Subsequently, I switched gears. I joined a company called Schindler, where I was the first woman in a male-dominated
Wow.
industry. It was tough, I have to say that, but it's under pressure that you learn a lot, you struggle, you fail, you learn a lot. So 6.5 years at Schindler is something that goes down in my entire professional career as the most enriching part,
Amazing.
where I learned a lot. And then subsequently, there came a point in time, Ashutosh, where I felt like, the charm of sales and marketing was getting lost
Mhm.
completely.
Mhm.
I was at a stage in my life where I was questioning what next, what did I want to do? And the whole art and science of leadership started fascinating me
Mhm.
immensely. And that's when I moved to training and development. That's after 15 years of having been in sales and marketing.
Amazing.
So the
Mhm.
last 15 years I've been in
Fascinating.
coaching, training, and I would say the last 5 years has been in couples counseling. So both my husband and I, we are couples
Mhm.
counselors. And yeah.
Amazing. And how has your own personal journey, including your partnership with Nelson, shaped your understanding of healing and connection?
So, there came a point in my life when I was, 27, 30 years ago, I was married, the first marriage that I was in. Sadly, that was not meant to be.
Mhm.
I went through a lot of pain and turmoil because, like any other middle class girl, marriage was my goal, apart from, of course, being financially independent. And that shook me up quite a bit. But
Mhm.
it was also a point in time when I started looking inwards. I turned the spotlight on myself. I looked at myself and I said, okay, why is this happening? What's happening? I turned towards spirituality at that point in time. And that was the
Mhm.
point in time when also, I was moving to coaching and facilitation, which also calls for a lot of self-reflection, introspection, working on yourself. So I
Mhm.
think both these parallel tracks help me to, grow personally and professionally. I was asking very tough questions of myself.
Mhm.
I knew I was not playing the victim card anymore. So a part of, more empowered part of me was kind of manifesting itself.
Mhm.
And I met Nelson when I was, completely healed and ready to settle down again.
Mhm. Very
And
nice.
since then, there's been no looking back. He also is a leadership coach and
Mhm.
consultant like me. So
Wonderful.
he challenges me ever so often. And that
Fantastic.
kind of helps. Yeah.
Fantastic. And when I was reading about you, you often quote Socrates, uh,
Mm,
which is an unexamined life is not worth living. How
yeah.
has this philosophy guided your personal and professional growth?
Yes. So that's something that I believed in always, Ashutosh. I feel that the one responsibility that we have in our lifetime is to see how we can become a better version of ourselves. How can we look inwards and see what is it that I'm doing wrong, or what can I do better? How can I hold a larger canvas for myself? How can I build better reservoirs of inner resilience? How can I set compelling goals? What fears can I let go of?
Mhm.
And what possibilities can I invite?
Mm.
So that's the spirit. The spirit of self-inquiry is what I advocate, but also practice in my, personal and professional life. And that has helped me in good stead, going
Oh,
forward.
I'm sure. I'm sure. So let's now move on and talk about couples counseling therapy. And I know that this is a very, very important subject in today's world because someone called me this morning about something similar. Um, your husband and you coach couples together, which is a very unique model. What advantages does this bring to your coachees?
Yeah. So this is something that we, moved into during COVID, and we realized that we were informally coaching and helping a lot of our friends navigate, issues in their marriage. And given that it's a second innings for both Nelson and me, we've gone through our set of challenges. So there is practical experience of a failed marriage in the past, but we've also had several challenges which we worked through over the years.
Mm.
And so that got us thinking that, now that we seem to have understood some method in the madness, why can't we take this forward to other clients as well? So both of us, I subsequently, of course, trained myself. I'm a level 2 trained counselor from the John and Julie Gottman Institute, which is, they're considered to be the gurus as far as couples therapy is concerned.
Mm.
And both Nelson and I, when it's a couple coaching another couple, it helps because it brings in different perspectives.
Yeah.
And two, I have seen the men gravitate towards Nelson and the women find it easy and, are more comfortable with me. So there's a sort of a balance that gets established.
Fascinating.
Also, I've noticed that while, our thinking is similar, Nelson and I are also, we have very different styles. And the
Mm.
feedback that we've got is that it works.
Mm.
So I have a softer approach. Nelson has a more, incisive approach, and that's working as well.
Fascinating. And I guess both these, complement one another.
They
But
do. Yes.
Aparna, tell me, what are some of the common challenges? And when I look at my own life, I'm 68, started work when I was 21, been married for 42 years. Our life was very different. But when I look at younger people today, the stresses are very, very different.
Hmm.
What are some of the common challenges you see couples face today, especially in an urban and a professional setting?
Yeah. A lot has changed in one generation,
Yes.
Ashutosh.
Yes.
In the earlier generation, roles were very clearly
Mm.
demarcated. The women took care of the house, the men
Yeah.
went out and earned the bread. So there was no real, opportunity for conflict.
Mm.
Now, in modern marriages, and particularly in urban modern marriages, the expectations have changed.
Correct.
Women have become more financially independent and they're demanding a lot more from their relationships, which is a fairly legitimate ask. Why
Absolutely.
not?
I
Right?
agree. Mm.
So, equality has now become, the expectation in marriages. Roles are, men and women are expected to manage the household and the
Mm.
family
Mm.
together. So, that has come about in one generation. But our grounding, our conditioning, our education are still steeped in the past,
Yeah.
right? So gender stereotypes are still very common.
Mm.
Patriarchy is still very relevant.
Mm.
And, many young couples now do not have role models to lean on.
Mm.
So it does call for education, shifting of the mindset in trying to, manage a modern day marriage. So
Mm.
the gap in the conditioning and the ask of marriage today is what creates a lot of friction. So the space for friction has really increased.
Well
Some of
said.
the common challenges that we've seen is, again, this is typically a man's job or a woman's job. So, overstepping of boundaries there is creating a lot of friction. And also the inability to resolve conflicts. Conflicts will always be there in marriages, but how do you repair them? How do you, communicate with clarity?
Yeah.
How do you connect with compassion? I think those are some of the challenges that people are struggling with.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And very, very well said. Thank you. Um, what role do past relationships and unresolved baggage play in current marital issues?
So, like in life, the past is never past, right?
Correct.
It's
Correct.
still very much alive.
Mm,
And for many of us, particularly those who've been through trauma or insecurities very early in our life, it catches up in the form of, how we respond to our fears, the kind of limiting beliefs that we bring to the fore and respond and, behave from that,
mm,
or the kind of feelings, the intensity of emotions that we experience.
mm,
So the past plays a huge role. And, a couple's or a marital relationship is really an intimate one, not just physically, emotionally, in every which way. So that's likely to, trigger the wrong buttons. There is no getting away. You can't just, project a really good image. At some point in time, your past and your baggage does catch up.
mm,
So a lot of our work actually goes back in time to see, what is really the source or where is that coming from? Whether it's a belief or a certain behavior pattern or the expression of fear or the expression of emotions such as anger, guilt, shame, where is that coming from? And that helps to, unlock a part of you and
mm,
bring more of yourself to the
mm.
relationship.
Very well said. And Aparna, what do you believe is the most misunderstood aspect of therapy for couples?
So plenty, I would say. Some of the ones that we've heard ever so often are, if we are soulmates, it should be easy for us. Why
Mm,
do we have to, struggle to make it work?
yeah.
Why does it call for so much effort?
Mm,
Then clearly something's wrong. Maybe we are not meant to be with each other. The other is, why me? I don't need to change. My partner needs to change.
mm,
The third is, oh, this is who I am. This is who I was before marriage. And, I don't think I can change at this age.
correct.
But, neuroplasticity completely debunks those
Mm,
myths by
mm,
saying that you can change and
yeah.
alter.
Yeah.
I think the question to ask is, what do you want to change for?
Mm,
What's
correct.
the purpose? Who are
Correct.
you changing for? And is it worth the change?
Mm.
So I think those are the kind of deep
Very,
conversations that we
very interesting.
facilitate.
And when you work with couples, um, both both partners would not necessarily be as engaged as the other person.
No.
How do you approach couples when one of them is disengaged or reluctant?
So typically, it's only one partner who reaches out to us,
Okay.
normally. And in some cases, both are aligned and are, actively seeking counseling and therapy. But in some cases, we've seen that it's just one person who's reaching out more actively, and the other person doesn't feel the need to be part of it.
Mm,
Of course, it's not ideal, but we do work with this partner who's engaging with us to
mm,
see how can he or she show up differently in the relationship, right? What are some of the boundaries that he or she can set?
mm,
What is the way they can communicate? How can they manage themselves in the relationship? Can
mm,
they do something differently? And usually, Ashutosh, the actions are really small. It could be as small as listening more intently
mm,
or communicating in a fashion that, doesn't seem like a judgment or an attack,
mm,
things like that. So we help this person manage. We've also had partners who reached out to us saying, hey, we are stepping out, but help me manage the transition. The
mm.
decision has been made, and then we work with the person to manage the transition. It's
Right.
never an easy one.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah,
I agree. I
that's how
agree
it
with you.
works.
I agree. And I'm sure you're faced with situations involving infidelity or even deep betrayal. How do you tackle some of these?
Yeah. So no easy answers there.
Yeah.
And John and Julie Gottman also very clearly say that if there is a case of infidelity, and the person wants to repair, come back, if he's, filled with remorse, wants to share it, and the other spouse wants to work through, then that's something that comes under the ambit of counseling and therapy. But if the partner keeps it a secret, and is again then showing up in therapy, it's not likely to work. It's contraindicated, and that's a violation of the whole process. So transparency, openness, willingness to share, building trust is really the foundation of a healthy, thriving relationship. So we've had those cases, yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. But have you ever felt that it's too late for a couple to seek counseling?
So, like I said, many people, and we've had people come in their mid-ages as well, when the children have flown the nest, and then they're, the husband and wife are looking at each other to say, hey, we don't recognize each other anymore.
Yeah.
And what can we do about this? I would disagree with the fact that it's too late. I think the resistance to change increases as we age. We get more set in our ways of being and working and behaving.
Correct.
But if there is strong intent, then, like I said, neuroplasticity completely supports a transformation. And we've seen that. We've seen fairly rigid people, the body language shifting, their mindset shifting to say, hey, I think I was getting this wrong. Let me try. I want to kind of, show up differently in front of my spouse. So it's never too late.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great response. But I've also been noticing, and what you just mentioned, empty nesters, children have grown up and gone. I'm seeing a lot of older people, including several friends, who in their late 50s, maybe after 30 years of marriage, decide that it's time to part. What is probably driving such kind of decisions?
So I think many of them, and this is what we're also figuring out, in the Indian setup, it's always socially very difficult to step out.
Correct.
So a lot of couples choose to be in a very unhealthy, even a toxic relationship, but leading very parallel lives, right, under the same roof. And it's really sad. Somewhere it starts telling on your well-being. There's a huge impact that it has on your physical well-being, your emotional well-being. I think at some point in time, I've seen people as they age, they get more comfortable in their skin. Some of those fears start fading. Holding up a certain image in society also, they learn to stand up for themselves and say enough and no more. It's one life only.
Yeah.
I think those turning points or those shifts in their way of thinking may lead to, moving away, stepping away. Even though, Ashutosh, I feel they're few and far between.
Yeah, that is true. But also, I've also seen, Aparna, that for older people, they've started to give much more space to one another. Realizing that, we're both individuals and do much more together, live together, but yet have enough time to do whatever you want. But that's another topic. Coming back to our own conversation, I'd love to get your perspective on premarital counseling. And why do you think it's underutilized in our country?
Just like parenting, up until a few years ago, we know nobody went for a parenting workshop, right, on how to become a better parent. But you do see parenting workshops have come about. Schools engage parents to, how do you deal with your child? Parenting has become a fairly complicated game.
Yeah.
Like I said, in one generation, we've seen a huge shift as far as couples' marriages is concerned. The expectation, the want, the, how we need to be in a relationship has changed. In fact, I was telling my aunt this, that my husband and I do couples counseling, and she frowned at me and she said, this is not something that you do. It's something you just learn. You never taught all these things.
Yes.
But it worked up until now. It's not likely to work going forward. Right? So I think we are still a generation in transition where there's still a lot of stigma attached to going for couples counseling. It's seen as, hey, there's something wrong with me and I need to go for couples counseling. That shift has changed for parenting workshops. I'm hoping that the shift also changes for, marriage. And I see some of the younger, the generation Gen Z, the millennials who are getting married are open to couples counseling before they tie the knot. How are we going to make this work? Some very critical conversations and some grounding rules, a common vocabulary, which actually set them up for success.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. I hope this
But
becomes...
again, they're few and far between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's much more acceptable with the young people.
That's
Time for a couple of more questions. And this one is for you and Nelson. How do you balance therapeutic neutrality when counseling as a couple yourselves?
Yeah, that's an interesting question you ask because, like I shared earlier, we've come through with our set of baggage and baggage in the form of a failed marriage in the past. So while we worked on some of that over the years, there's been massive training, education, and I said, a lot of self-reflection and introspection. At the end of the day, as therapists, we are human, and some things are likely to trigger us. I think staying or being mindful of our own triggers and biases is something that, we bring into any coaching, counseling relationship. The other is both Nelson and I have given each other permission to call it out for the other. So those checks and balances also come in. Like Nelson doesn't hesitate to say, hey, I think your bias is coming up. You want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And that's the only way to minimize the impact. So being very, very mindful and conscious. Neutrality is extremely important in the work that we do, just as confidentiality is.
Amazing. And my last question for you, Aparna, I'm not sure if this is something which is easy to answer, but are there any practices that you would recommend to couples to adopt every day to strengthen their relationship?
And that's easy, actually. Ashutosh, it's interesting. People think that a thriving couple's relationship is like a big ask. There are big changes required of us that we may perhaps not recognize ourselves if we completely transform and change. But the reality is, it's just small actions and behaviors that can lead to a dramatic transformation in your relationship. So I'll share two which, the Gottman Institute talk of. The first, of course, is rituals of connection. And these could be, home leaving or entry, when somebody comes into the house. What are your rituals for connection? Is it like a simple hug or sitting down to talk about how was your day? Early morning, late night rituals. And research has shown that most people, wake up with certain fears or certain, being anxious. After all, we're living in a time where there's a lot of stress that's going on. Mental health, in any case, is on the rise. So the early morning and the late night are usually the time when we experience negative thoughts or stressful thoughts. So if a couple can have a ritual in these times, it's a great way to build connection and to strengthen the bond between the two of them. So defining it could be, cooking a meal or watching a movie together, but actually planning it and not, letting it pass. And I've heard so many couples come and say, oh, we just don't get the time. We are so busy. We don't want to do these things. So it has to be consciously planned and maybe even calendarized in today's age.
Correct.
The second, what the Gottman speak of, is a turning towards bid. What they say is, all couples, every partner makes a bid for connection. So just this morning, my husband and I, Nelson and I, we are into birding. And I saw a bird which I haven't seen right outside my window. So I called out to him, hey, come and look. I think it's a new bird that I've spotted. Right? Now, if he quickly came and he's like, oh, maybe it's a shikra. No, I think it's this. Oh, it's this. There's a conversation that happens. But in a partnership, if that bid is ignored or it's met with indifference, it creates a dent in the relationship. So can you just be involved? It could be just a body language of looking, oh yeah, oh nice, or even if words are not spoken, it's just the body language of involvement. So turning towards bids goes a long way in strengthening a relationship. Like I said, small things for big results.
Amazing. Amazing. And on that note, Aparna, as you were talking, I was reminded, when we got married, I remember the Pandit said, marriage or relationships are like a thread where you keep pulling it, pulling it, pulling it, but don't ever let it break, because if you do, then no matter what you do, there will always be a knot in it.
Yeah.
In that relationship. And that has served us very, very well. But I think this conversation with you has been so amazing. You made me think a lot. I'm sure you will make all our viewers and listeners think a lot, because it is a very precious relationship that you have with your partner. And investing in that relationship is important. And yet, at the same time, as you said, we are all human beings. There could be challenges, there could be issues. And a lot of your thoughts were very, very powerful indeed. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh, and thank you for asking fairly deep and powerful questions. I think it made me think too.
Thank you.
And I'm glad it's going to be useful for our viewers. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.